Good evening, everybody. Brian Neubert here from goldenblack.com, live in Mackey Arena at Purdue following the Boilermakers' harrowing 69-67 Senior Day win over Indiana. This is your wrap video following that game. It's brought to you by our friends at the Purdue Club Hotel, that photographer's strobe lights, and the Boiler Up Bar. Thank you to them for their support. Thank you to those of you who came out on Thursday night to hear Alan and I babble for an hour about Purdue basketball. Now I'm going to babble again for another 10 to 12 minutes about Purdue basketball, while I also mourn the tragic passing of my best set of earbuds, which inexplicably snapped off the wire right before the game. They look like they've been chewed through by a mink. I don't know how this happened. I'm very upset, but we are going to get through this. I'm nothing if not professional, even in the most dire of times. So Purdue wins 69-67. Kind of a similar story for Purdue. In terms of, I'll start with the negative stuff. How about that? I know how you like the negative stuff. It's almost unbelievable at this stage of the season to see Purdue, after all it cost them this season, have another stretch of turnovers the way they had that stretch of turnovers in the second half. It was 5 turnovers in the span of 6 trips down the floor. It obviously turned this game in Indiana's favor. Very easily could have cost Purdue this game, the way that run of turnovers in the first half of the first Indiana game cost Purdue that game, the way all of the turnovers at Michigan State, especially to start the second half, cost Purdue a win there over a not-so-good team who has simply gone on since then to further confirm that it is a not-so-good team. This has been Purdue's fatal flaw all season long. They've had a couple of mini fatal flaws, foul shooting being one of them, but turnovers have been the Death Star that hovers over this team. And they are a very consistent common denominator with failure for Purdue this season, which is what made the Wisconsin game so difficult to take, is because you took care of the basketball, you defended as well as you have all season long, and you still lost on a crap shot at the buzzer, preceded by another crap shot before that. Anyway, I've already done with the Wisconsin game. I'm here to talk about the Indiana game. Purdue, all of their self-destructive sorts of tendencies sort of converged again today. The turnovers were the worst of them. The free throws were right there. They were 14 of 21, but 3 of those misses were 1-and-1s. So you can do the math there. Ball screen defense. I think by the sound of it, Xavier Johnson was kind of making the shots Purdue was willing to accept from him in that regard. They didn't want him getting to the rim. They didn't want threes. They didn't want dunks for Trace Jackson-Davis. To Xavier Johnson's credit, he made the mid-range stuff. He made the pull-ups. He made the runners. Nevertheless, Purdue was giving up points like a sieve to the most basic offense possible. That started with about 4 minutes to go in the first half, bled into the second half. So a lot of Purdue's greatest hits this year in terms of things they struggle with when they don't win, all kind of came to bear today. That being said, the positive, I think, outweighs the negative by a wide margin, because all of your seniors played their best basketball, almost, I don't want to say storybook fashion because that sounds ridiculous and the definition of hyperbole, but you needed your seniors to be good, to win this game, and all 3 of them were as good as, I'm not saying you needed them to be good to win this game, period, but when you needed them to be good, they were all really good. Eric Hunter, this is one of the better games of his Purdue career, if you ask me. I thought he was fantastic at Wisconsin at the defensive end of the floor. I think the way he has finished this season has been enormous for Purdue. That has been maybe the single biggest change in Purdue for the better from the halfway point on. The fact that Purdue didn't get a share of the Big Ten title out of it, is pretty disappointing, because I think he has really made Purdue a better team through the last 6 weeks or so. Huge credit to him. I think Sasha Stefanovic obviously was really good down the stretch in this game. Travion Williams, I thought it was one of his better stretches all across the board of the season. over the final 5-6 minutes of this game, both at the offensive end, the defensive end, especially on the defensive glass. He really came up big for Purdue. I think you have to give all three of those guys a lot of credit. This was sort of, kind of the line in the Batman movie where the Joker's hanging upside down and says to Batman, "This is what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object." Both of these teams have had really complicated relationships with close games this season. Indiana had Wisconsin beat twice, which they're kind of like the anti-Rutgers, where Purdue owes Rutgers so much for allowing them back into the Big Ten race by beating everyone else. It's the opposite for Indiana. Indiana not only knocked Purdue back a peg by beating them in Bloomington, but also blew it twice against Wisconsin, really hurting Purdue as much as anyone. I'm sure they're really losing sleep over that. But Indiana's had a really complicated relationship with close games. Purdue has had a really complicated relationship with letting themselves get into close games and then losing on garbage. And it was all right there for the taking again for both of them. And it was one of those deals, somebody had to win. And I think that what this came down to for Purdue, more than anything, and this is another enormous positive for Purdue on top of the way the three seniors played today, was loose balls. You can make a hell of a drinking game the last 6 weeks over you guys taking a drink every time I say, this hasn't been a great loose ball team. This has not been a standard, prototypical Purdue team in that regard. Purdue's perceived a certain way. I don't think this has been that Purdue team in terms of their willingness to cut your throat for a loose ball, to use as graphic a term as I possibly can. My apologies to your delicate sensibilities. I don't think this has been that team that, would throw themselves off a bridge or run into traffic for a loose ball, kind of things like that. Where do I get this sort of imagery? I'm a sick and twisted individual. That's where. But Purdue got every loose ball tonight that I think mattered. I'll have to go back and watch it tomorrow, but I thought Purdue really did a good job from a loose balls perspective. The 15 points off second chances and the 14 offensive rebounds, those stand as the difference in this game. Purdue seniors closed it out. They played great, but it was those loose balls, those second chances that Purdue got, those garbage points that Purdue got, that they haven't done a great job of all season long of necessarily thriving on, allowing that sort of thing to be your identity. I think those things were the difference in this game. And I think two guys on top of the three seniors playing really well when it mattered most. Two guys really mattered in this game. I think Ross-Ade was a play. I've lost control of my thought. I think Ross-Ade, maybe didn't have his best game statistically. What does he get? He gets 10 points and 11 rebounds. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing to sneeze at. 11 points or 10 points, 11 rebounds. But I think what he did on defense, I think he was the prototypical rim protector for Purdue today. I think he's the reason that Trayce Jackson-Davis didn't get a whole lot going on other than like pick and roll stuff, which is a big part of what he does. So that obviously counts, but I don't think their post-up game really had much of a chance because of Ross-Ade's presence. I thought early in the game he really made things difficult on Trayce Jackson-Davis. I think at some point in the first half he kind of got between Jackson-Davis's ears a little bit, as shot blockers and rim protectors sometimes do. Really affected the game. I thought he played a great defensive game for Purdue. And then obviously Mason Gillis was a consummate Mason Gillis game. I think that stretch in the first half where I don't know if he technically got 2 offensive rebounds, but one of them was an offensive rebound. He tipped out to somebody. So I'm counting it for my purposes, but he had back-to-back plays off offensive rebounds that led directly to Purdue three-pointers. I think he played a big-time Mason Gillis game today, big-time loose ball game, big-time offensive rebounding game, big-time situational offense game, opportunistic offense type of game. I thought he was fantastic in this game. Huge part of the reason Purdue won. Obviously, the seniors will dominate the headlines tomorrow, as they should, because all three of those guys, again, you almost couldn't have scripted it any better that it was the three seniors who kind of dug Purdue out of this on their day. But Mason Gillis was fantastic, and I thought Ross-Ade at the defensive end of the floor was fantastic. I thought those guys provided Purdue some real Big Ten grit in this game. I think that I've said 1,000 times this season, you can go back and count. I've probably said this 1,000 times, that you think I'm kidding. If you go back and count, and I challenge you to go back and count, if you go back and count, I bet you it will top 1,000. I say the same stuff over and over again a lot. It's a long season. Purdue could be a great college basketball team, but I don't know if they ever became a great Big Ten team, because I think things that win in Big Ten are different than what win otherwise, and I think a lot of what you saw from Ross-Ade at the defensive end and Mason Gillis saw across the board today were big-time Big Ten, grit types of elements that really helped Purdue today. I think Eric Hunter's really helped them too with strong guard play and whatnot, kind of down the stretch. So those guys deserve a ton of credit for this. I think for Purdue to be able to win despite a lot of those old ghosts haunting them again, the turnovers, the free throws, the struggles to get stops for stretches of play, I think for Purdue to overcome that stuff, I think there's a little bit of significance there. There'd be a lot more significance if that stuff didn't happen. That stuff didn't happen at Wisconsin, and Purdue still lost. I think that was kind of one of the really, hard parts to take about that Wisconsin game, that Purdue did so much right, and still it came down to a couple of unfortunate bounces. For Purdue to be able to win when Jaden Ivey obviously doesn't do what Jaden Ivey can normally be counted on to do, I think there's enormous positive in that too. Again, there'd be even more positive if it wasn't that way, but it's my job to craft narratives after games, so it's all I have to work with. That was a joke, by the way. I know how some of you love to blame the media for crafting narratives. Anyway, Jaden Ivey's 2 of 11 from the floor, did not make a 2-point field goal, committed 3 turnovers. Today, I think Indiana did a fine job shutting down the lane as soon as he even got his eyes on it. Really made things difficult on him. I think, surprisingly to me, I think the ball stuck in his hands. He probably over-dribbled a little bit too much, dribbled himself into trouble a few times, probably got a little frustrated. Part of the process with a player like that. I can take you to games Carson Edwards Jr. year. When you have scores like this, sometimes you have to play through some things. The last 10 minutes of the game at Minnesota, Carson Edwards Jr. year, were one of the roughest stretches of individual basketball I think I've ever seen. It kind of comes with the territory with players like that. Sometimes it goes both ways on you, and he needs to be better in his decision-making than I think he was in this game. I do think the attention paid to him opened some things up for Eric Hunter, just like they did at Wisconsin. I think they did at Michigan State to a certain extent. But Purdue needs him to be better. Purdue needs the best of Jaden Ivey now more than ever, because obviously this is the biggest proving ground coming up there is in terms of the postseason, the Big Ten tournament, and more so the NCAA tournament. This is a huge opportunity for him. This is a huge opportunity for Purdue. I expected him to respond in a very favorable manner following that Wisconsin game. He obviously did not play his best game today. I think simply moving the basketball out of some of that attention he got today would have made this a very different game. But as I said before, you live by the sword, you almost die by the sword every now and then, and Purdue was able to overcome it, just barely, but Purdue was able to overcome it. So a complicated win here for Purdue. Obviously, there's no such thing as a bad win over your rival. There's no such thing as a bad Big Ten win, period. But you would have liked to have seen Purdue not to step on the same landmines that it so often steps on this year. Some of this stuff they simply have got to get out of their system. And the Wisconsin game looked like a real turning point, just like any number of other games this year looked like real turning points. And they turned out to not be turning points. So I think you have to keep that in mind going into the postseason here, that you can't really go into the postseason thinking you know what you're getting from Purdue here, which is not a great position to be in, but that's kind of where Purdue is right now. So that's what I got. from Mackey Arena for goldenblack.com and my Gone Too Soon earbuds. This has been your goldenblack.com wrap video following Purdue 69-67. I'm really good at closing these things out, aren't I? Unlike either Indiana or Purdue closing out a close game. It's a 50-50 deal. 69-67, Purdue over Indiana. Thank you to the Premium Club Hotel and the Boiler Up Bar for your support. We appreciate it very much. It's Brian Neubert from goldenblack.com. You know that already. Thank you for watching. Thank you for reading. Thank you for listening. And thank you for processing our materials, however it is you process our materials. And I will talk to you guys again from, what is Conseco Fieldhouse called again now? I'm sorry, what is Bankers Life Fieldhouse called again now? Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Thank you. Thank you, person who doesn't exist. Gainbridge Fieldhouse. I'll talk to you there from the Big Ten tournament, hopefully on the floor. I can make no guarantees because there will be other games going on unless Purdue gets that night game. I think they might get that night game. So what better way to close out this season than a 9 p.m. tip-off? How about an ice storm on the way to Indy on the way? That would be the perfect finish to this season. Thanks, everybody.